the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of John Watts, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love, poetry and all that other groovy stuff. He is basically Fischer-Z, who have just had a triple CD box set released by Cherry Red Records. So I'll put a link in the notes below. Also the website to the band and him. So this is the interview, so you'll find out more about that and lots of other stuff. So after several minutes of interesting but casual chat, we get down to the exciting subject of the early formative years. John, it's over to you.
George Melly.
George Melly, yes, Mr. Here.
The thing for me is, because I was a cathedral chorister in terms of singing. All my family are singers or soldiers, all of them, or singers and soldiers at the same time, professional soldiers. So I was a head boy at the Royal Military Academy at the cathedral in Sandhurst. So music, yes, I was always going to do. I always wanted to do. I thought I'd do something arty and musicy, or I'd play cricket for England. That was my ambition.
Right, God, that was very straightforward.
And thank goodness I wouldn't have been able to be playing cricket now. So
no, that would have been difficult. Whereas that was good.
No, but the musical thing. But I was interested not in. I was not. I mean, obviously, just as a little kid, I was interested in. I didn't like the things like. I was interested in the Kinks because I liked the stories.
Yes.
And then as I became an early teenager, I was really interested in Dylan. I was interested in poets. Dylan, the Velvet Underground. I mean, my hero was Andy Warhol, so always
Right.
has been. And the painting from Picasso, and obviously, I liked observer literature like Hemingway. That's what I come much more from. I'm a writer who writes songs rather than a rock person.
Right. Yes, absolutely. So were you into that world of the beatnik generation as well?
Yes. The beat poets and stuff.
The beat poets, so
sure.
Ginsberg, Kerouac.
Yeah, definitely. Disappointing when hearing Ginsberg live, but apart from that, I think he went off as he got older. But yeah, and also what was very funny, what I missed out on, right, Ralph Steadman did our first cover ever.
Right.
And I didn't realise the only hero I'd wanted to meet was Warren Zevon. And he was connected with Gonzo and all that lot. And I didn't realise that Ralph Steadman was part of that thing. Otherwise, I think I'd have found out. I never wanted to meet. Barry was a hero in as much as he wasn't he was an art person, and I didn't want to. I could have met Bowie, but never did. Could have met Lou Reed, but never did. Deliberately.
Right. That was yes, big decisions made there. So were people like Donovan and Al Stewart? Did they get, because they were quite wordsmithy?
Yeah, they're quite wordy, but Donovan was. I thought Donovan was Dylan light,
yes.
and I think that Al Stewart was. I don't know. That was. In the same way, when I was 16, everybody had a Pink Floyd album, everybody had an Al Stewart album, so deliberately I would go against anything that people liked.
Yes, absolutely. So when you got to, because you were that age then, you would have been very aware of the sort of the counterculture period at the,
yes,
I would have thought, and you would have sort of started to see the psychedelia period sort of develop. And so you had your jazz interest with George Melly and probably Chet Baker.
Well, it's not the jazz; it was as a performer. I have relatives who were in the music hall before the war.
Right.
And also, my big interest was in the politics of performers against Nazism in the 30s. When I did songs like Berlin on the albums in '81, I wasn't talking about the wall. I was talking about the 30s.
Yes, absolutely. I do remember seeing Barry Humphries a few years ago when he was working with Meow Meow, and they did the music of the Weimar Republic, which was great. So were you also interested in the culture, the music, the politics of that period of Berlin?
Yes, and especially, I mean, also, like, for instance, I was in Berlin with people like, not with David Byrne, with the other lot, with Tina and the other half of the rhythm bit of Talking Heads.
Was it Chris and Tina?
Yeah, at the late
was that
like
Tom
79, 80 in Berlin. I mean, because again, everybody associates Nick Cave back. I know, I'm not for anyone. I know Nick Cave when our kids have bumped into one another different times, but he was in Berlin later than that. This is 78, 79, and brushed shoulders with bizarre performers, people like Klaus Nomi. And people like that.
God, Klaus Nomi. So was he in Berlin at that stage?
He was for a bit. He was in Cologne as well, wasn't he? I can't remember. And you bump into all the strange people from who was it? Oh, God, I can't remember. But the not the Kraftwerk lot, but the other lot. It's the people that were around before punk but became heroes of punk.
What, like Can and Noy?
Yeah, there you go, Can. Exactly.
Right. So
oh, what's his name? Oh, yes, the main man from Can. Oh, I can't remember his name.
Yes,
Yeah.
probably.
And
yes.
also the lot that the bloke that Nick Cave knocked around with later, Blixer.
Oh, Blixer.
All that lot.
Yes, from Einstein Neuparty.
Yeah, yes.
Which I probably don't pronounce particularly well.
No, I can't either. But I mean, I spent a lot of time. But everybody thought I lived in Berlin. I never did. Obviously, Fischer-Z were very successful in Germany. So, yeah, I was knocking about there quite a lot.
So obviously, you mentioned George Melly and performance art, but did you then, when you got to that age of 16 and the 60s had just finished, did it feel a little bit like, oh, what's happened? When you had the death of so many people who was like Joplin, Hendrix, Morrison, the Beatles broke up, and you went, oh, I'm here, and then suddenly it's like, oh,
what? Oh no, I didn't. I wasn't particularly connected with it because I would be following through things like Dylan. So he was just going in. He was moving. He was doing his thing, wasn't he? That was all there. I wasn't connected to say with the rock thing. I just didn't. It didn't really get it for me because I was playing drums in 1969, for goodness' sake, when I started up with bands that were much older, and then I was doing duo stuff with playing guitars. But it was odd, but I mean, I was on the edge of the random folk club stuff when I was 16, 17, whereby you'd go in there and they didn't let you play your own songs. You had to play some dreadful finger in the ear hole stuff, and then you'd play one of your songs.
Yes.
They didn't like it.
But with the folk, was it people like the Incredible String Band and Comus or Fairport?
No, I just remember it as all the solo people, like Martin Carthy and all that mob.
God, that's serious, isn't it? That is serious.
It was serious folk, yeah.
Yes.
And I did backups for the acoustic, what were they called? Tyrannosaurus Rex, when they were a pair of bongos and stuff doing that. They were doing this like mad alternative folk thing. And Irish bands like Tír Noog and all these kind of people.
Right, so
but I was much more aggressive than them, though. I was always,
Dear old Mark, that was it. So when you got to 16, which would probably be 1970, did you stay and do your O levels and then do A levels at your college at this point, or did you?
No, I did. Well, I did. I was a comprehensive kid because people always thought. I mean, because we were offered it. If you go to the Royal School of Church Music, which I did the courses, they wanted me to go to St Paul's. So automatically you go there, you do it, you do Oxford, Cambridge, and you just do that. There's a completely one route for choir boys. But no, I decided that what I wanted to do was, I lived in Sandhurst, in the town of Sandhurst, which is next to the Royal Military Academy. Well, it was a village then, it's a town now. But the idea of there, and so that's on the Surrey-Berkshire border. So schools were within 2 miles, but I didn't live in Surrey. So I went, what changed my interest in music and everything else was, I went to comprehensive school in Bracknell Newtown. It started as a grammar school and went comprehensive in Bracknell Newtown. So you're talking about suddenly 35,000 East End of London kids dumped in the middle of Berkshire. Yes. So my voice changed from a sort of, somewhere near Reading, Burr, to you had to accommodate it, otherwise they'd kill you. But my way in was music and also sport. I play high level cricket, rugby, all those kind of things. So all my mates were skinheads. I was the only person with long hair, and they were skinheads, which was very strange in a rugby team.
Yes, absolutely.
Therefore, I got a big interest in things. I had a much more interest in reggae than all the other musicians I knew. And it's quite funny, when punkdom arrived, you're sort of there about in 76, and they were like the Clash were incorporating, they're interested in reggae. I'd been well into that for a long, long time. And I liked all the sort of Scary singles. I loved the singles like the Bob and Marcia things, Young, Twisted and Black. I adored that. So I could play drums like that. And so I was into, and my mates, one of my big mates lived in the Latimer Road projects, as it would have been called these days. And so my best mate all his friends were black. So although he was a white guy, he moved like a black guy, and we all knocked about with all that lot. So our music was very different. When we came through as Fischer-Z, they always saw us as quite academic, which was absolutely ironic. I knew the Stranglers, obviously, through being the same on the same record label at UA. And the Stranglers, although I was a clinical psychologist, they were always joking that I was a psychopath because we had more battles with Fischer-Z than the Stranglers ever got near. And that's what, but everybody, one thing I made a mistake of, I never had anything to do with music press. All my mates knew who made what record, who was on it, and God knows what else. At that time, I was working with psychopaths and then doing touring punk clubs at night. So I had no knowledge of those things. So when we were first interviewed and popular, they wanted a headline, and I've always been good at music. And I remember with Sounds, I think it was, they wanted a headline. I can't remember what it was. I think I said middle-class pseudo-intellectuals out of university, and they used that as a headline, of course. And everybody thought I was very posh just because I could speak.
Right. Yes, blimey. So you did your A-levels, you went to university, you did a...
Yes, I did, but I deliberately did nothing arty. My English teacher said to me, she said, why aren't you doing A-level English and literature? I said, because not the slightest bit interested. I don't want you to teach me anything. So I didn't do English, I didn't do art, I didn't do music. I did double maths, physics, chemistry and sciences, deliberately to avoid that. Whereas my mates, who we talked about earlier, who ended up on the comparative literature, they were all on the Oxford, Cambridge thing, literature, wanted to go. They ended up studying with Bradbury. They got pissed off. They studied so much literature at university, they didn't end up being writers.
Right. That was
great shame, really. I think you can get sick of it. But I deliberately moved right away from it, and I studied clinical psychology because it was the only course. It was a 4.5-year course whereby I could, as an undergraduate, I would be able to do the gigs some of the time in the evening, and also you get paid for the 6-month bits because it sponsored my university course. And I was also really, it turned out brilliantly for me because it turned out that I loved it. I loved working with psychopaths and very, very disturbed and violent teenagers. Yes. It was the most exciting life.
Well, I could imagine. What university did you go to?
I went to Brunel, Brunel University had no arts. The nearest thing they got to it, there was a bit of economics and a bit of law, and it was a 17-to-1 men to women ratio. And so it was but the irony is the creatives that have come out of that are incredible in the theatres and music people and band managers and all sorts of stuff because people were doing, you actually did their thing. The only thing I missed out on was a peer group naturally I should have gone somewhere like art college, then I'd have had lots of connections within that business. Also, we didn't do anything in London ever, so I'd never done stuff in London. And all the people that suddenly came through as, if you like, on the edge of new wave and punk, from the Elvis Costellos to Joe Strummer and everybody else, they'd all been doing the London pub circuit for like 3 years. The Stranglers have been doing this pub circuit since 1973. So they jumped on that bandwagon. We weren't in existence before that. I was doing a certain amount of, I was playing solo acoustic gigs and doing bits and pieces. But the band formed that became Fischer-Z, it's called something else, but got together in 75. So, you know what I mean? We didn't do those circuits. When we had our first record, for instance, wonderful people got involved in it. We had Ralph Steadman doing the cover, Gerard Mankiewicz was doing the photos, John Pash, who did the Rolling Stones' Tongue, was our art guy. They meant nothing. I liked them, but I didn't know what they'd done before. My mates and mine go, "Oh, God, you're working with them." And I'm thinking, yeah, who are they then? Right, and because imagine this, when I was 20, I went to see a management company. Given the fact the only rock people I could identify, and obviously I saw Bowie's Hunky Dory tour, I saw the first Roxy Music tour. They were the bands that I liked. But I went to this management interview and they offered me a management deal, and they wanted to take me on. And I just didn't like them. I didn't like the bloke that interviewed me, the American bloke that interviewed me. I thought he's a pillock. And what's really funny, given the fact that Bowie was the only company, that was Tony Visconti, and it was Main Man, and they wanted to give me a deal. But that was 20 then, but I'm glad it wasn't, because that was before Do you see what I mean? That was before punk broke and before new wave broke. Many of my friends who were involved in music before that, their existence, it died. What they'd built between, say, 74, 75, 76 was meaningless because it was swept away. But we were there at the right time because Fischer-Z and what I did appeared with better words and much more melody than most of the other bands. So that's why we were able to communicate at quite a high level with just about everybody in Europe. But I got sick of it because the point is people say, well, why isn't it as big in England? It's very easy. Our first 2 records were fine. We did that. We had John Peel support. We were playing to 1,500 people in London. But the third, we were in America not long enough for the second album, and So Long was a minor American hit because there were so few things on MTV at that stage. We did it, but our managers were very naive. We should have stayed there. But we came back to make the Red Skies record. That became enormous across continental Europe. And I did so many gigs, and I absolutely hated it because they were saying it's like a rock star, and that was not my interest. And so I just walked absolutely away from it. Before we'd done the English bit, it was all set up. Everybody was playing it. Rowley's was going to be a big hit. It was all going to be wonderful. And I just stopped.
You just walked away from it all.
Yeah, I decided the day before to walk away from it.
Blimey, that must have gone down really well. Yes, because I did Richard Strange from the Doctors of Madness. He said he was about 2 years too early, but everybody in the audience then went into being punk bands and they just timed it perfectly. And obviously Dr. Feelgood did it. But then, there were a few people who it's all about timing and luck in a way. So
it is. I mean, the Feelgoods, what amazed me was I didn't know much about Dr. Feelgood, or if they were signed to UA. I didn't realise that they had a #1 American album. I just assumed it was an English Canvey Island thing.
I would put my money on that as well. Was that down by the jetty?
Yeah, I can't remember which one it was. It was the one. It must have been 77 or 78. I don't know. Because then I went out on tour with Wilco. When Wilco set up his solo band, I did our first Fischer-Z tour was universities, about 25 of them, with Wilco Johnson and his Solid Senders, and I learned a lot from Wilco.
Yes, I would imagine, actually. And at that stage, then, were you juggling your day job as well as your evening?
No, well, it sort of crossed it. Well, the ridiculous state of affairs. I mean, I was doing like working on shift in the mental hospitals, and then so I'd leave there at 4 and chase the band wherever they'd gone, catch up with them on the way to Birmingham or Manchester. Then I'd come back down and do it. Start working at 7 in the morning. But that was still that was within the university course. Do you see what I mean? Because I did 3 full years university and 3 6-month work placements as well. But I finished the university, ironically, I finished the universities, left university, and then we got a record deal with UA 3 days later. So, when I left university, I was really, at that stage, the establishment were trying to encourage, the people to do things, the psychologists. And I had experience of the most difficult placements, the really interesting placements. And they said, look, reluctantly, we haven't cooperated with the system. We really think you really should be a psychiatrist. So with your qualifications, we'll give you, in those days, you could get a shortcut medical degree to go with all the psychology. Yeah. And they said, look, so you must do that because the thesis I wrote. And I was weighing it up, do I want to be a psychiatrist versus being a pop star? And I decided I'd go for pop star.
Well, at that
moment. And then, actually, I found it difficult. But the thing is, I realised I wanted to be an artist. I wanted to be I saw it, the music bit, it is music, but as being not high art, but somewhere on the art spectrum. Once it becomes a conservative part of music business is incredibly conservative. The idea of the major... I've been signed to 7 different major companies, which is very rare. Yes. Over 25 albums. Because I always start with it, and I get fed up because things don't happen quick enough. And not, if you're saying to me, if you deliver it now, we might be able to put it out by next November. It's boring. It's just not interesting, especially at this stage of my career.
Well, absolutely. So because it's interesting, I did an interview with one of the lead people from Voice of the Beehive, which came...
Oh, I remember them.
Tracy and...
oh, wow, that's a couple of...
But it was interesting because she came, her father was a sort of musician in the 50s and was still doing stuff. Yeah. But it was interesting because she just wanted to do music, wanted to be in London, and it just all happened so quickly. It was just like she met this person, did a demo, then this happened, then suddenly it was a studio, then it was like, my God. So you had a slightly similar thing where it all mushroomed very quickly, didn't it?
Yeah, oh, ridiculous. I mean, the great thing, as you know, like the same applies to relationships. You learn from mistakes so well. I mean, you just do. And for me, you had this ambition to have a music art career, as it were. But on the other hand, I thought that doing the psychology course would finance and be a good background for it, which it was, a very good background for it. But I felt we were too old. I felt I was much too old being 23, when I thought the other, all the punk, and it's an absolute lie. They were all old gits.
Yes.
Also, the idea of me being hammered for being posh, coming from an East End of London school, comprehensive school, they were all posh. They were all from public school. Joe Strummer, I mean, the greatest poet, Shane McGowan. Huge admiration for the guy. He was at St Paul's. They were all at fucking, it was so funny. But the thing that journalists didn't like in those days was if I was literate and I was capable of interviewing them. They didn't want that. They wanted to mess up. I mean, Joe and people, they played it down. They never played out there. I just was me. Do you know what I mean? And so, again, I never learnt that you're not allowed in press to be very rude about other acts. It's seen as a bad thing. If I liked the act, I said they were great. If I didn't like it, I wouldn't be diplomatic. No. And all those kind of things. I mean, for instance, I've never been on Later. This is for you only.
Yes.
I've never been on Later because I was interviewed several times because I'd said I think Jules Holland is a brilliant compere. It's a wonderful format, but it's a pity he ruins everybody's tunes. I'm saying because I've worked with really good boogie players, but significantly, me and dear old mate of mine, Kurt Brandon from Theatre of Fate, Spirit of Destiny. Have you ever interviewed him?
Yes. He's
such an interesting dude. I like Kurt.
Very nice, yes.
He's a great guy, but he's still got a great voice. But I mean, he also offended him. So I think it's about time, isn't it? Because we still do. He does very good contemporary stuff, as I do. And one day they'll have to let us on. We're about the only two that haven't been. Think of anybody who hasn't been, apart from anybody who sold 3 million records and made 25 records with a story like I've got. And Kirk's got a similar one. The fact we've never been on it is unfair.
It's very unfair. But it was interesting because about 6 months ago, I did an interview with the producer of your album, Word Salad.
Oh, you mean Mike Howlett?
Yes. So,
what did you think of him?
Well, he was a delightful chap, actually.
He's a delightful chap, but we just didn't get on at all. We were absolute chalk and cheese.
Were you? Because he did have a very...
He'd be rude about me.
I don't know, but he did tell me about doing the work of... oh God, A Flock of Seagulls, and the fact that the guy's vocal, he had to work on his vocals.
Well, he also did orchestral movers in the trousers, didn't he? He did them as well. The thing with Mike Howlett was he came from as a producer, Martin Rushent approved our signing, and obviously most people like the Buzzcocks and the Stranglers were produced by Martin. That was the way it was. But he had some kind of dreadful disease in the East, somewhere in the Far East, caused by debauchery, and so consequently he wasn't there to produce our record. They got Richard Gotterer in, who's a genius. I love Richard Gotterer. He did the first single, but he couldn't do the album. Then we got Mike Howlett, and Mike Howlett is a gongy hippie bloke.
Yes.
And so he was, for me, the good side was the record ended up being very different from everybody else's because there was a fight. Because I didn't play electric guitar ever until 1 month before the first record. We slung out the guitar player before that. So I'd played a really aggressive acoustic, so I played Telecasters and things like that. He wanted to play down the guitar. Our live stuff was guitar-y and much more aggressive. He wanted to play up the keyboard stuff, and that's what we fought over. And with the second record, in the end, that resulted in me losing my big brother, Steve Skolnik, from the whole thing, because basically Mike was playing one against the other. And then he told me I had to go and make my big mistake. So I produced the third one, and it sold 10 times as many as the other two.
Blimey, you were very prolific in that period, because I've sort of realised...
Yeah, 3 and 2 years.
Because, doing these interviews for mostly bands from that period, the 80s, most people have a 5-year narrative, the 12-month honeymoon period, the John Peel play, the John Peel session. The album comes out, the tour, the transit band.
We had a 6-month period of that with John Peel.
Did you? Yes, because he embraced you. But how come you didn't ever do a John Peel session? Did you?
Did
Did
two,
you?
I think. Yeah, we definitely did John Peel. So we did two. I did two whistle tests as well, and that was another thing that Anne Nightingale. When we released Marlies, she was saying, she was such a big Who fan. She said Marlies is better than You Bet You Bet. We're going to make this massive for you. And then she didn't speak to me after that because I just left the band, and she backed it. Everybody backed it, and then I backed off from it.
Yes.
I did in front of 80,000 people in Inter Milan football stadium. So we were doing it till we were guests. We were big-ish, but we were guests of Dire Straits when they're making movies.
Right.
I'm a huge fan of Mark Knopfler. He's an absolute genius. For me, the best guitarist that's ever been, compared with all the things. And also, brilliant lyricist, good singer, and overall, amazing bloke. It's so funny they got this name for being middle of the road when Knopfler was the business. Absolutely, but just didn't shout about it.
Yes, there was a sort of an 80s production sound which kind of spoiled a few bands for me, or a few albums that could have been, if they could be reproduced or
I mean, Jimmy Iovine, people like Jimmy Iovine, that was very smooth. And so you had that bishing, but the thing I just found extraordinary, I mean, I've never, ever seen anybody with the ability that Knopfler's got, the idea of playing incredibly complex things, also with great feeling, with no effort whatsoever, singing against it. And his humour was fantastic. The idea, I mean, I like creating offensive words to well-known songs. He's brilliant at it. He would do different versions of his own songs in sound checks that completely blew my mind. Yes. I got on well with him. I mean, having worked we did a number of gigs with the Police as well at that stage. Sting was civil enough to me. He was friendly enough to me, but he didn't like people that he talked to me because I was the front man, but he didn't get on with the others. It was a social thing with him.
Yes, well, quite. So then, what was the reason then, after 3 albums with this very tight band, that you decided to go solo?
I didn't do 3 albums with the band at all.
I thought...
Basically, the first album was with the band. That was me, Steve Skolnik, and the rhythm section, Dave and Steve. Then with the second album, that was when Mike Howlett was trying to make it more keyboardy. I was objecting to it. He, in the end, turned everybody against the middle, and so Steve Skolnik left in the middle of the second album. The original band didn't. He was still there for the second album. The third one, by that stage, it was me in a rhythm section. So I did my, we did the rhythm tracks, guitar, bass, and drums. Then I did guitar, keyboards, singing, guitar. I did that in Red Skies in 5 days. Right,
blimey. What studio did you go to?
The Manor.
The Manor.
It was up there with Richard Branson interfering.
Yes, well, but that was on a different label, wasn't it? Was that Liberty Records?
Well, it's all the same thing. And we were signed to UA, but they were called Liberty and all that kind of business. Also, remember, halfway through the second album, UA was swallowed by EMI and Parlophone. And so we was transferred over. And then at that stage, we only had a 3-album deal. We'd sold skrillions of records, and we had an absolutely open deal. So they called us in. When I'd left, I just walked away from. They said, well, obviously you don't want to be in the band. Be Fischer-Z. We'll make you an offer you can't possibly refuse, which was really loads of money in 5 years. And of course, you never say that to somebody who's actually an artist. And I would never have done it, even if I'd wanted to. If somebody tells you, if Suits tell you that you've got to do something, I believe that art should not necessarily be anti-establishment, but it should make people think and make people question. And artistically, you must never, ever compromise. Business-wise, I've been in a mess, but that. And so that caused a big rift with my manager then at that stage, because he went white, because he could see, a 20% commission, an advance of, getting on for £750,000 is 20%. Yeah. And I just turned it down, and he ended up shutting my head in the piano, so we didn't work together after that point.
No, that's probably
it's always bad.
It's not a good because so that period was quite interesting, because we had Thatcher in '79, then we had the Falkland War, the miners' crisis, we had Greenham Common. So and you were right there with your prolific kind of output at this point.
Yes.
What was that, how was that affecting you? Because there was a feeling of doom and gloom at the time, or certainly from certain sections, and then
Sure.
other sections were having a time of their lives. So how were you navigating that
Well, the point is,
political landscape?
all my political, I was always very political. So my political stuff dealt with Europe and world politics rather than in the microcosm, rather than the English thing. I mean, everybody was moaning about Thatcher and UB40s and the rest of it. With the miners' strike, it was quite interesting because a lot of people went out with the red wedge thing, but they didn't know me, so I didn't get invited. But we were one of the only bands. I actually wrote a song which was quite popular amongst our people and in Europe called "Dark Crowds of Englishmen." That song I used Pithead Buildings for the for the rhythm track and all that sort of stuff. I actually wrote about that big time. But again, we didn't have the English profile, and when you were talking about politics, I was known in Europe. My reputation was something between Weller and Billy Bragg.
Right.
And intellectual. I'm not an intellectual. I'm bright, but I'm not an intellectual. And so I would be always brought in by the cultural media to comment on political things, But then they said, "Why didn't you do Live Aid?" And I said, well, because they thought this is ridiculous because that's what you do in Europe. But we weren't part of an English setup, so we didn't know them.
No, that whole new romantic period. But then, yes, and electronic music. But then at that time on EMI, I do remember interviewing a member of the Farmers Boys who just
I remember them as well. Yeah.
And they got signed on the same day as Kajagoogoo for EMI. Yeah. They all sat together and had their photograph taken and looked quite odd because obviously they were very different styles. Yeah. So you used your solo albums for came out on EMI around that same time.
Yeah, it did. But I knew, but that I was more on the same angle as the Saudi Mark that died. Talk.
Right, Mark.
He was the only one I identified with in that area, and we both had a fantastic indie press bloke who Philip Hall.
Oh,
who
yes,
was legendary.
Yes.
He was just, I loved Philip. Philip said, "Get off this label." He said, "They're screwing you to death." Because I'd made the Iceberg Model album, which would critically, and especially in Europe, was seen as very experimental and very interesting. And the label manager said, "Well, this is brilliant or it's rubbish, but we don't understand it." And so there was us going on. Like several people were getting off at the time. I mean, I'm trying to think of the other ones. But basically, Philip went off and he managed, he started that whole thing, didn't he? He had that tragic series of cancers until he died. It was terrible.
Yes, God.
But I had huge time for him.
Yes. And I was going to say, on the second album you did, the Iceberg Model, you brought in your saxophone, trombones.
Yeah, all the Dexys lot.
The Dexys lot, indeed.
Yeah, they toured. They didn't tour with me. They did all the stuff. In the end, I went out with a 7-piece band at that stage. The things on that record. I was very different from anything else that was out at the time.
Did you come across the Wag Club and Chris Sullivan at that point?
No, I didn't. I hardly ever went to London. That was the other different thing. I stayed in Brighton.
Right.
And from that point, where are we? Is that just before Lucy was born? It was all quite, I mean, at that stage, it was, we were touring a lot in Europe. We did a lot of stuff in Europe. And I went straight for having left being the Fischer-Z and being the leader. Obviously, they did the solo stuff, but they were stiffing them because what they wanted me to go was go back and if I'd have done a fourth Fischer-Z record, because then they could guarantee they'd sell 1 million of them and all that. And so really they didn't. That's why the people who worked on it said, "Look, you're just not getting the support." And so I moved away from it.
Right, and then you went to Arista to do this other album called with the Cry.
I've called all the. But the thing is now, people. I don't know, brands. It's a terrible thing to say. A man I've got great respect for, Peter Jenner, who obviously managed Billy and he managed Ian Dury and he managed everybody, Pink Floyd. He was a bit of a mentor for me, and I used to go and see him, and I wanted him to manage. He said, "Oh, for fuck's sake, what's this?" He said, "You are a solo act. You always were. Why the hell didn't you just be Fischer-Z and do anything you want, paint pictures, do this," which is what I do now.
Right.
But do you know what I mean? But at that stage, people didn't do it as much, did they? I mean, people like, what's his name? Spiz. He did Spiz Oil, Athletico, Spiz 80 and all that sort of stuff.
Yes, that's right. And
But people didn't.
Marky Smith said that
Yeah,
famous line, didn't he? You know, if it's me and my grandmother, that's the fall, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, now my son who manages me now. I mean, the point is, if it's two Australian surfers and a penguin, it's still Fischer-Z. I'm not intending to do that, despite an Australian tour.
No, well, absolutely. My God, that's amazing. But then, obviously, by the late 80s, you didn't embrace that.
Yeah, I did a Fischer-Z record because I thought it was then 6 years later. And I felt that, because what I didn't want to do, because also I'd done Fischer-Z with the lads, and I just thought that fair enough. I mean, it wouldn't have been Fischer-Z as it was then. As Fischer-Z Mark II, it was different.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I know it's probably curious. You had given up your day job by then in the 80s.
Oh no, I didn't have a day job from the minute we signed to UA. It was because that's the advantage of it being successful quickly.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, the idea of being given, I'd never had any money. The idea of we got an advance for that. I mean, I did sensible things. I had a deposit on a flat in Brighton from the first album. So, you know, do you see what I mean? With $3,000, you could get, you know, it's like a fifth of a flat. So,
well, absolutely. Yes, you're absolutely doing brilliantly there. Did you find, though, as the 80s progressed, I found that, again, sort of seeing bands and how they struggle with different, you know, there's that next wave of 16 to 18-year-olds that come along, and then, you know, by the late 80s, ecstasy had appeared, and then there was this kind of new scene, and then we had the dance scene, then we had the Manchester, and then there's the grunge scene. There's different labels. How did you, because you're very prolific in the late 80s and early 90s.
Well, there's only been periods where there's not been many periods where I haven't done lots. The thing is, well, I've never gone back and listened to the music that shaped my teenage, for instance. I'd never done that.
Right.
And so I always listened to everything that was new. You don't copy what's new, but you get sort of seeps in there somewhere.
Yes, well, absolutely. I did notice, though, with artists that I really liked in the 70s, Bowie being one of the obvious ones, and there were other ones, that their 80s work was very, like, for once, they seemed to be a little bit like not sure what to do. They weren't just going, this is what we're doing. It's a bit like, oh, I'll get this producer in, there's this sound, oh, I'll get a stylist to do my hair, I'll get the mullet because that's very popular. And you think, oh my God, that's not good, David. I think
the funny thing with, I mean, but I kept going and taking things on and doing different brilliant things. The irony was when he finally got the ultimate commercial album, I don't think he liked it as much. You know what he got?
No, that was his
went wrong
period. Yes, Let's Dance, because it was a mixed blessing of like, God, I can do this and I can sort out my problem. Was it Tony DeFries then that tried to manage you earlier from Main Man?
No, the interview, all I knew was it was the producer interview. It was Visconti. It had to be Visconti because he was the producer.
Right, and he was keen.
Yeah.
He was very keen.
Oh, yeah, because at that stage, because I was doing, I mean, the point of that stage, where are we? That's hunky-dory time, isn't it?
Yeah, so that was...
A little bit later. Was that 74?
Well, I think 74 was probably Diamond Dogs.
Yeah, something like that. But it was really funny. And I remember there was a management company called as well that wanted to give me £30,000, which was huge amounts of money, and sign me for 2 years and all the songs. And it was Lou Warburton Enterprises.
Yes, that's a difficult one to embrace, isn't it?
Yeah, and it was a case. It was a real sort of. It was a bloke with a cigar, you know, and he had a kind of Russian assistant who looked like she didn't have anything on under her fur coat, sitting on the desk. It was crazy. I mean, I've loved that. I love the sleaze. I like whenever I get contact between the music and the criminal world. That's fantastic, and I've seen a bit of that.
Yes, well, it's at least it's obvious, wasn't it?
The characters have gone. I mean, we did when we were doing all the stuff at the what was it called? That gig in West London, the famous punk gig in West London. I've forgotten the name. Not the Kensington. What's it called? The one anyway. That one. And you'd run into people like Wayne County in the electric chair.
Oh, fantastic.
You know, and he was evil. And the dirtiest, filthiest, smelliest band in the world, the Dickies from America. And you've got all these people. And I find most things amusing, mate. I just do. Because you have to do that, really. And also, I don't know if, did you see the book that I did, which had coverage in America, The Grand National Lobotomy?
No, crikey.
I didn't see that. I wrote a play called The Last Picasso, which was done in Europe. That must be 10 years ago now. And so half the book was some of that was the early dialogue from that. And the other half was dark poetry and writings and bits and pieces. So that's what I'm known for, but not in England. And what was hilarious was, I don't know, about, must be 6 or 7, long time ago, there was a tribute to Amy Winehouse. And I'd written a poem about Amy Winehouse, and I was invited to London by a group of people who were doing it, who didn't make any connection between John Watts and Fischer-Z. They just thought, John Watts, loved the poem, will you come up and read it at this thing? So I said, yeah, okay. And I went up there, and I read the poem, and then the guy who'd been the editor of NME in 1979, Neil Spencer? Does that make sense?
Yes, that sounds familiar.
Anyway, he came up to me and said, John, marvellous writing. He said, I'm amazed I haven't seen your work and stuff before. And we haven't crossed paths at some point. I said, we did. He said, what do you mean? He said, I was in a band, Fischer-Z. He said, what, you? You were the Fischer-Z posh bloke? You're not that. I said, no. I said, my contact with you was, the NME's review of the first Fischer-Z record was, there's been a lot of money spent on that, full stop. And I said, I wouldn't have minded if you said the music was rubbish, but they didn't review it. And the fact was, there wasn't a lot of money spent on it. We were the same UA wasn't a major at that stage, you know.
Yes.
And he said, oh, my God, I'm so sorry. We all thought Fischer-Z were good. I said, really? And having recently, with different, who else did I see? I mean, I met people, I've never met my contemporaries till I was in my 60s and 70s. I was never in London, you see.
Right.
So people like Matt Snow. He said, oh, yeah, I was talking to Matt. A lot of the guys that write for what's left of the music press, like the sort of mojos and things like that. And lots of them. And it's quite funny. And Fischer-Z has a good reputation. But I think it was the nature of disappearance. You got punished when we did 287 gigs or something like that in the 2.5 years, and the first ones we did the tour with Wilco and stuff were in England. We'd done 50, 60. Then for the whole 2 years up until I left, we only did 2 in England and 200 outside. And you needed to do the English thing. Our management it was a mate of mine. He was a very clever businessman, nice guy, but knew nothing about music. Anybody, if you have a successful American tour and they want you to do a lot more you stay there. You had to play in America. Right. We came back to make the record, which meant that we came back to make the record much too quickly, over-gigged it, got so tired. And then I'd nearly drowned, you see, before doing that leaving. I got dragged out the sea in Portugal and pumped water out of. And I decided, look, I'm not doing exactly what I want to do. And I was on a swing talking to the session keyboard player the night before the show. I said, I'm not going to do it anymore. He said, you're mad. He said, you're absolutely at the top of what's going on. Everybody loves it. You're going to be huge. And I just thought, nah. And what's funny is, you sometimes, one thing that's interesting, people like Bowie and again, Dylan, if you like, their life is a performance art. It's itself. It's myth-making in a lovely way. It's creative myth-making. I've always been into that. I wondered if I actually did what I thought I did in 81. And so anyway, I was going gig in London. A bloke in his 50s came up to me and he said, hi, John. He said, I've been trying to see this for ages. I was doing a solo thing in London, small thingy. It was a showcase for a band album, but it's me playing solo. And he came in and he said, oh, that was great, and this, that, and the other. And he said, I came to see you with my dad. And I said, where? And he said, oh, it was the weirdest of gigs. My dad came to see Dire Straits, and Fischer-Z were on. So when I got there, you were on, and I saw at the end of the second half of your set, which was amazing. And I said, how clearly do you remember it? He said, so clear, because it was weird what you did. I said, what do you mean? So he said, I remember, and I thought I did this, but I couldn't remember if I did it. I thought it was something I made up. I got to the end of the set, I remember that, and there was huge cheers to do big encores. Went back on to do the encore, and I said, apparently, I've been playing my songs all year with the band here. I'm just absolutely fed up. I don't want to do this anymore. It's driving me nuts. We're going to play Twist and Shout in C. And I looked at the band, and everybody can play Twist and Shout in C. And then I said, I'm gone. And I did it. I thought, did I make that up? I don't know if you have things like that. You think, did I actually do that? And the fact he came up and told me that, I didn't prompt him. He said, that was amazing. He said, I can't believe it. He said, my dad said, what's he doing? It's just, And then obviously everybody, the band thought, oh, it's Watsy again. The trouble was, you see, I want to keep going with music. So I'd already started making a solo album 3 months later. And what I did was, EMI had us in. They were sure I'd take their money. And so I said, no, I took a small amount of money and made a solo album. They thought they'd humour me, and then I made another solo album. Then they decided I wasn't going to do it, and then the manager went mad. He was my mate, but the idea that he never got over looking. I mean, he was made for life with the advance that would have come from the next Fischer-Z thing. And then it wasn't a court case, but there was legal going on for 3 months, which meant that 3 years. So it meant from a very big sales of Red Skies, all the money was held in a court. And held in a court account. And so they taxed 5 years worth in 1 year when it was finished. And it was just, and the other thing is, you see, at that stage, I wasn't interested in the money, but if I'd have had a big amount of money, it would have been representative of how big we'd got. I never really understood how big we were. What you touched on that point so accurately, the idea, if people came to it very fast, we went from playing to 12 people in Apeldoorn in Europe. 12 people, our first gig in Holland, 12 people in Apeldoorn. A week later, with the release with Rembrandt, we were playing to 600 people in Amsterdam. 2 months after that, we were second on the bill, 20,000 people. And it was that quick.
Yes, and you probably think, God.
That was natural. That was okay, fine. It's good. And 79, we made the album. I got married. Mike Howlett came and stayed at our house, which was pretty bizarre because that was part of my honeymoon. Because we had to play. I got married, and then 2 days later we played the Rainbow.
Crikey.
Sold out, and it was just crazy.
Well, yeah, your wife must have been wondering.
She wasn't that pleased.
No, I
was married to her for 25 years. I've got 5 children with her. I'm divorced from her now, but we have dinner every month. It's great.
Oh, that's. I'm glad that's slightly got a happy ending.
Oh, it's all happy ending.
It's always good to have a happy ending. Yeah. But then you did a couple of amazing projects. You did one in 2002, didn't you? Ether, which was one of your multimedia.
Yeah, the thing was, people were doing.
You like complex and creative ambition, don't you?
Yeah, sure. When we got accused because at the same stage, Ireland were doing a project called One Giant Leap. Yeah.
Oh,
and we were running parallel with that bloody thing, and they accused me of copying it just because they had more money. I didn't copy it. I was actually on it. They had money. They were going to regular occasions. We had a laptop that had a maximum hard drive of 4 gig.
Yes.
So I've been recording with a laptop on a wet road in what's it called? The bit of New York that's over the bridge. Rappers at 2 a.m. I went to loads of different places all over with Sarah, filmmaker, as my girlfriend, and we did this together. And unfortunately, that was the era before social media. We would have made it. There was nowhere to send it back to. Do you know what I mean? And we had to take everything off the computer and put it on discs every night.
Yes, God, and that.
I loved it though. I loved it. We did Ether Music and Film, and that was quite amazing. Then I did the 2-piece album, which unbeknownst to me was done parallel. I was recording with Sam Walker doing Real Life is Good Enough the same year as Jack White did the first White Stripes album.
Right.
And what was really funny was somebody was interviewing me about 6 years ago in Brighton. They interviewed Nick Cave and me, one of the really top Dutch in music business in people. And then he went and interviewed Jack White the next day. So Jack White said to him, where have you been? He said, I've been in England, I've been in Brighton. I interviewed Nick Cave. He said, yeah, fine. Another bloke you'd never have heard of. And so he said, well, who was he? And he said, John Watts from Fischer-Z. He went, oh, God. And he rushed out and brought back his copy of Real Life is Good Enough. Because he's an absolute music magpie. So what he did was, what he was trying to find out, because that was the Black Keys' first album, I think Fraction after it, wasn't it? They were big, the two-piece Americans.
Yes.
So, but apparently we'd released the same year, so he wanted to find out who in Europe was doing the same thing. And he said, I can't believe that wasn't a big album. So he was a fan, Jack White was a fan of that Real Life. But I followed Real Life by doing It Has to Be. And I was only allowed, I set myself one day in a city to find a person, write their song, and work from there. And I went all over Europe doing that. That was fun.
Crikey, that is very prolific, isn't it?
Yeah. No, I just like I think everything should be different. I mean, for me, Warhol, I mean, the idea that, he'd wander out one day and say, let's go to the cathedral. Let's make a film and let's bring in the firemen. I mean, that's what art should be about.
Yes. So then after Real Life, you brought out It Has to Be.
Yeah. That was the one where I travelled everywhere. I worked with people like, I found Marissa, who was the biggest Fado act at that stage in Portugal. And I nearly got killed by her boyfriend, gangster boyfriend, who didn't understand why I was working with her.
Right, because you nearly drowned, you nearly got...
Yeah, but the thing is, we're one of the very few bands that, I mean, we've actually been... there was a lot of fights in the early days because there was a situation whereby I was very, I didn't take kindly to people who, like, for instance, with somebody... do you remember the big cans of beer? You could get like 5 pints of beer in it. Somebody threw it at my bass player, and so you obviously go diving into the audience and battling with people. And we were shot at with a crossbow in Greece, which was quite dangerous.
Well, absolutely.
Yes.
That is quite
so funny stuff, yeah. And again, the funniest thing was in punk folklore, there's the famous place where there was the battle at the Speakeasy between Paul Weller and Sid Vicious. This is notated everywhere. What they didn't know, it was my bloody gig. It was a Fischer-Z gig. And because basically I saw Weller at the bar, and Sid came in. Apparently the insults were about... I think Sid said to Weller that he'd copied all of his stuff from the Beatles, and Weller got fed up and stuck a pint pot in his head. He was wandering around with a pint glass stuck in his head. Then he went to hospital. He was fiddling. He was trying to pull the keyboards off the stage with us. I was about to belt him when our roadie picked him up. I was a boxer as well as a teenager, so I wasn't worried. I mean, from working with psychopaths, and people going with punk is, that's somebody tried to burn my ankle with a cigarette. I said, Jesus, I've stood up against people trying to kill me with a broken bottle in the rusty kitchens of mental hospital. For me, that was nothing. You know what I mean?
Yes, it was probably just, yes.
Yeah, in those days, you're quite lean. I mean, I get into trouble these days. Somebody took my hat, some hooligans, about 16, 17, in the shopping centre, and I was with my daughters. And I just chased after them. Really shouted at them, and they gave my hat back. And my daughters were livid because obviously 4 16-year-olds can kill me. But you forget I forget I was 65.
Yes, well, absolutely. That's amazing. It's interesting because there are bands that I know who just can't be bothered to do any English gigs. There was Shelley Ann Orphan, who were in the 80s, but also the Trees, and they just relocated to Europe. And we're just going to play in Belgium and Spain and Italy, and that's our audience. And there's just no reason. Did you find the same? And let me.
Not at all. I was desperate to play in Britain all the time, but it wasn't. It was just a difficult place to get the gigs, and always the record companies saw big money to be made in Europe, and they'd never push it in Britain. But the point is, I mean, this year, ironically, because I had, did you see the project I did last year, the Art Punk thing? Did you see that?
Yes, so that came out.
That gave us terrific. My manager, he was worried that would confuse people with the profile, but because I did 10 tunes, and then I had 10 pieces of art, and I made a surrealist film, and I toured in Germany mainly. I toured art galleries, and that raised the profile hugely in there and in Benelux.
Right.
And so that was fun. That was very different. I mean, obviously, and the joke was, because the art was taken serious, I thought it would be, you get music fans buying your art. It was a totally different audience. It was an art people. The art people liked it because it was I did all the art. There were big drawings with a pencil, which I've got in my pocket somewhere.
Right.
Literally with a 4B pencil, and they were big. And so the art critics liked it. I got like front page of things like the art pages and things like Süddeutsche, the southern German big paper, and also the Frankfurt paper that goes around the world. Then what I get to do, you see, they did an article on my art, and then I got a chance, they do a political article as well. Like I had a big article in the German press 15 years ago, that there should be a two-tier Europe, for instance, with two-tier economies. And then they got a big article last year, because I said how they should restructure the fact that, obviously Western political two-party politics was completely dead. The idea of the EU was dead, and how they should restructure it. And so I was on the front for the art and in the inside for the politics. But and that's the reputation I have in Europe. But in England, not at all. People would be really surprised. I've been to see radio stations in England. They say, well, your biog's interesting. It's obviously a lie. How come you did the last 3 gigs with, Bob Marley? How come you played with James Brown in East Berlin with 167,000 people? People just don't believe it, mate.
That is very just rude, isn't it? It's very rude.
But the thing with me is, I'm just absolutely, totally grateful for having made money, enough money to have. I'm not rich at all. I've had money and I've lost money. I've got my little flat that I actually own. But the idea of having made money and be able to make a living out of making music this long. Art, and also having a family, having the kids that love me, and doing that bit as well. I mean, it's amazing.
Yes. Well, and
I'm eternally enthusiastic and positive.
Well, this is the main thing, isn't it? Really, you've got to keep your So just coming back to this release, you just got the first.
Well, that's the beginning. What we got with I wanted the contrast. They wanted to do the compilation, so I said fine. But in exchange, the deal is we do that, and then they're doing the new stuff as well. So there's an original single, Strings, that came out as the single a couple of weeks ago. Yes. Strings is the new track. But also I've got the album that's coming is 7 new tracks and 4. Have you heard anything? Have you heard that?
Yes, I've heard of some on Spotify. On Spotify, I've been listening to it. So I heard your new material as well, because I thought, this is very
yeah. So you've got 7 new tracks and 4 reimagined tracks of the most famous Fischer-Z stuff. Obviously, I've done things in 3s that used to be in 4s. There's no point in rearranging the same way.
Yes.
But even with Strings, I like a quick turnaround. So Strings, the version, the single that came out 2 or 3 weeks ago, is the version from what will be the album. We've already reimagined that as something else, as a bootleg version, which comes out in 2 weeks' time. And each time we make different films.
Yes. And there was just one last thing, because I sort of realised this, but in the 90s, probably the 90s, there was a band and an artist from a Bushy Malongo. Did you
Bushy Malongo?
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you work with her?
I did. It was a joke with Peter Gabriel, because I'd done 2 albums at Real and I used to play tennis with Peter every morning. The most wonderful man in music.
Yes.
Yeah, I did sometimes. He's a most amazing man, loved by men, women, dogs, and everything else. But I spent a lot of time with him, and we were joking because he did the world music thing. Became what? It became a real started growing mid-80s, yes. 85, 86. I joked that I'd made the first world music album without him, because I was contacted in Holland in 1982, 83 by a friend, a press guy who worked for EMI in Holland. And he said he knew of Bushy Malongo, who was an exile from South Africa. Yeah. And she and a band were living in a one-room place in Amsterdam, in freezing place. And they needed to, I can't remember what they needed. They needed some kind of help. So I agreed to finance and produce 5 tracks for them so they could get a deal. And my one claim to fame on that was, it was wonderful. They wanted to make a westernized record and I wouldn't let them. But the demos that I did with them in the winter of 83 or the winter of 82, it got them the deals, and it got her out, and she got her kids, and she was able to be reunited with Miriam Makeba. So that was great. And very sadly, now Pete. So I joked. I was joking with Peter. He said, "Well, you did a world music album, didn't you?" I said, "Yeah, I did." But the thing was, I think it was about 4 years ago now. She got cancer. She died. Oh. But when she was very ill, suddenly I got a phone call from her sons and said, "Look, John, do you remember?" I said, "Yeah, of course I do." They were getting together a concert hopefully before she died, which didn't. Did she make it? No, she didn't make it. And they invited me to go and play. And what was the most marvellous thing? She was the most amazing person to record. I recorded her with 3 stereo pairs of mics for her voice and for her body and everything. Terrific singer. I still sing a song of hers. She got me to sing, so I got the range. I sung on the stuff as well, reluctantly. But there's a song called Vomalana Matongo Buile Kai. And I always sing that song. And she also did they do, I really hate it when they do The Lion Sleeps Tonight. That's absolute bollocks. That's not what the song's about at all. And it's not Imaway, it's Imbuboy. And what the song is about, it's not about fucking lions. It's the song that they used to sing. They had to walk 16 miles to work towards the sunshine as the sun rose. That was the song. And the song's a mantra.
Yes.
It goes, it's Vamalana Matongu Buyilikai, Vamalana Matongu Ngongongolitai. You see, that's what the song is. And and so I was delighted. Anyway, when I called the son and I said, he said, do you want to speak to Mum? And I thought, yeah. And I can't remember the nickname for me that she had, but she had this talking and singing voice. And obviously she was very ill with cancer. It's this tiny little voice. And she said, I remember you, love, love, love. It was just, it was beautiful that I managed to speak to her about 2 weeks before she died. But yes, I have got a very strong Boosie connection.
Yeah, well, I just remember her first 2 albums. One which was quite sort of produced, but the first one was really gorgeous. And I just remember
you'd like the demo? The demos are amazing. Somewhere there's the tape. I did 5 tunes somewhere.
Oh, well, you have
to bake them. If I can find it, it's around somewhere. But it was that albums. Those tracks were amazing. She still had Mao, the big guy from Gambia, playing that big bass drum and the little rattly drum. They wanted to play a Western drum kit. I said, no, don't do that.
Don't do that. That's a bad mistake. Yeah.
If I find that ever, and I get a copy of it, I'll send it to you if you're interested.
That would be amazing, because I really love those. I mean, I love those discoveries you have, and her vocal were just amazing. So, but anyway, look, well, thank you, John, for this.
Thank you.
This has been amazing.
I think.
But yeah, we came via Matt at Cherry Red. So, but if you do ever find any,
great dude. They're a real record company. It's really funny because I've dealt with so many majors that farm everything out, and the idea that it's a horrible building they're in, but when you go in there, modern building, it was actually like a record company. There was a young fella putting things in post bags. There was 3 or 4 different people listening to music. It was like a label used to be.
Yeah, well, he's good. Well, look, I'll keep in touch via Matt, because I'd love to.
That.
Yes, because obviously, if you
also up in your neck of the woods, the guy who engineers for me. His name, not the Graham Bonnet, but his name's Graham Bonnet. He's a genius. He does my mixing and stuff. We made this record, the original tracks on there, the first 7, the new songs. I've got the new band now. The new band played the reimagined stuff, but we did all the stuff. Basically, I did that by post with him, with Graham. So although it sounds like a band, that's basically me, the original tracks.
Doing it. Brilliant. Well, look, I'll let you go, but thank you ever so much. It's been
great to speak to you. Really interesting, because there's all sorts of angles I don't normally get a chance to talk about.
Well, yes. I'm really pleased I mentioned it. Was only because when I was looking at what the single is that I was listening to, and I thought, because when I saw that on your page, I thought, oh my God, I love that artist, and I'd slightly forgot about it since the 90s probably. And
Did you ever hear my favourite album from the 90s was, I did an album called 13 Stories High. Did you ever find that?
13.
Have a check that out. It's on Spotify somewhere, I think. But that, you see, is done by different names. I think that was called J.M. Watts, and there's things called Watts, and there's the there's 4 or 5 different names. We're pulling the idea this year. We're getting much more. Is that those 80s albums were big bricks in a wall, and the wall's made of all the creative stuff. What's happening is, ironically, I'm getting a lot of feedback from the English-speaking world. And the idea of obviously being associated with Cherry Red gives us kind of credibility. So I've got a label, as you probably know. I've got Surreal Records is my label.
Yes, I saw that. That was very interesting.
And we did, imagine the other thing we did, which you probably didn't see. I did an album called Big Beat Poetry in '98. and that was hip hop. That was on Motor Records, So Cool in Germany.
Yes.
And that was me with a distorted acoustic guitar and a DJ who was European turntablist champion spinning 4 decks. Imagine we were in New York, and the deal was they put a lot of money into it. We made a limited edition, 5,000 vinyls, 5,000 CDs. That was it. It was boutique. But I was playing and we got appreciation. We were playing New York with Grandmaster Flash in the audience, and all the black guys. It was amazing because that kind of thing. The single from that, Big Beat Poetry, is one of the big things that the fans do. But you can't do everything. If we do a 2-hour show, we can do a fraction of the songs. But what we're doing in the European tour, through the second half, we're all over the place. Germany, Holland, Belgium, France, all over the place, finishing in Australia. But the first half of the show, I'm going to give them a request thing where they can choose 12 songs from 40.
Right.
So I get a chance to play more. And what I'm going to do, I like going in the audience and asking them why they like the song, like a big game show. And also what they hate about Fischer-Z, what they really dislike about this. And if there's somebody who's rowdy, I love it. I want to get down there because I've got radio stuff. Get down there and say, why are you even bothering to come? What is it you dislike about this? I just love that. And I don't know if you know, I do solo Fischer-Z things in theatres, about 500 right across Europe. So there's more politics, more talking.
Excellent. You're out there. Look,
people don't know what we do in England at all. It's very funny.
But look, I'll let you go. But thank you again for your time. This has been amazing.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay.
And as I say, Bonnet lives up near you. That's why he's just south of Norwich. He's out there in the middle of nowhere.
Oh, great.
Yeah, and I get up there sometimes.
Okay, right. Well, look.
We're aiming to put more English. We've got a London date in, but I think we're going to get radio interest from the bootleg mix of strings, which I think's on the listening thing you've got. If you've got the album, it's the last track on it.
We'll have a check that out.
Because that brings together the 80s synthy, noisy stuff with what's very modern, and it crashes it together.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
well, look,
good to
thank
speak.
you again for your time.
You're welcome. Hopefully speak again.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye.
Bye. And that was me in conversation with John Watts, talking about his life in music and Fischer-Z. This has been the C86 Show, David Eastaugh. So if you want to contact me, you can on any of the social media platform sites. Just do C86 Show. All these interviews have been archived on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. Have a great week. Stay safe.